Hey everyone, it's True Review! Right here with another top 10 list. And it's been a while since we've had our last True Review Zone video, so this time I thought we'd go back to it and take a look at the 10 times in video games where I found myself scratching my head. Now I want to make it clear that this list won't include games that are supposed to be silly or over the top anyway, because they're supposed to be like that, and we're not really supposed to question it. But this list will include games that are meant to be taken seriously, yet include strange sections that aren't explained or are well hidden for no apparent reason. The rules for this list are, as usual, includes only one per franchise. It also demands that there is no current information as to why what's being talked about is the way it is. Easter eggs don't count on this list either, as they're meant for the player, and finally, the entries themselves don't have to be game specific, as in, if they appear in other games too, and seem to do the same thing, then it counts. And that's everything, so hit it! No, not the microphone. Alfred wanting to leave. Telltale's Batman games have gone for the reboot approach like with so many other outlets these days, and have taken us back to the beginning of the story to tell us how Bruce Wayne got his hands full with so many problems. In the first game he had to face against Harvey Dent, Oswald Cobblepot, and Lady Arkham, while in the second game we've added Harley Quinn, Bane, Riddler, Mr. Freeze, and eventually the Joker to that list. But as we can expect, he eventually overcomes all of them and manages to restore some form of law and order back to Gotham. However, by the end of the second game, your butler, Alfred, has had about enough of all of this. Now, this isn't much of a surprise, given that his health is deteriorating before our eyes during that game, and all of this is taking its toll on him. But as the dust settles over Gotham again, Alfred decides to pack his bags and leave the city behind. Again, this isn't much of a surprise, but it's his reason that confuses me. According to Alfred, the reason why he's leaving, and the reason for all of his stress, is Bruce himself. Alfred explains that before Batman showed up, the typical criminal that Gotham faced was nowhere near as extreme as it is now. That by the very fact that Batman exists, criminals have had to adapt in order to challenge him. Therefore, this would mean that all of the blame for all of these criminals existing lies at Batman's feet. But that makes no sense. For one, the game makes it very clear that the Riddler was operating long before Batman showed up, Carmine Falcone too. In addition, everything that has happened to both Mr. Freeze and Harley Quinn happened outside of the Wayne family's influence. Bane's excuse isn't really given, Harvey Dent was always going to fall, and Oswald Cobblepot's beef was with the Wayne family itself, not Batman. The only one we can say was caused by both Bruce and Batman was John Doe, aka the Joker. So Alfred's argument suddenly falls apart. Not only that, but he cares for Bruce so much that he doesn't want to see him get hurt, so his response to this is to leave Alfred. I don't understand, and I suspect that you don't either. Also, why is anyone still living in Gotham if it's constantly getting hit with crime? The Norwood Hotel. The Norwood Suite can be described as f***ing weird, and there were many aspects about this game that I could use for this entry, such as, why does everyone talk using sound instead of words? But instead of that, I've decided to focus not on the people, or the gameplay, but the hotel itself. The Norwood Suite kind of reminds me of jazz punk a little bit, but without the comedy and lots more LSD. Your mission is to go to the hotel, locate the DJ, and give him a CD. But to do that, you need to first rent a room, and then you need to get into the club in the basement by finding pieces of a costume to get in, and the only way you can do that is by helping people out. But in the same way that the guests of this hotel are strange, the hotel itself is also bizarre. Almost every room has a secret switch in it that opens up a secret passage that leads you to other parts of the hotel, usually acting as a shortcut. But why would anyone design a hotel like this? I get the impression that this is an old hotel that's been done up several times, and despite the weirdness that hangs in the air, there's nothing here that suggests that there are nefarious goings on here. So why the need for so many secret corridors and passageways that link up to other people's hotel rooms? And the rooms themselves seem to be designed by crackheads, Like they were holding some kind of competition to see who could do the worst job possible, and honestly, I'd give my vote to the guy who glued all the furniture to the ceiling. Panda! Yeah, have we all forgotten that the Tekken series has a fucking panda in it? 'Cause I sure haven't. I mean, you could argue that it's also got Gon and what the hell is Yoshimitsu exactly, but here, we have an actual adult panda bear who not only is dangerous as fuck, but also knows martial arts. How was anyone able to teach it martial arts? Despite the occasional wackiness of this game, it's supposed to be taken seriously most of the time, but I fail to see how we can do that when we've got a fucking panda who knows how to fight, and apparently wants to protect Ling with its life. Can anyone explain this to me? Why is there a panda in this that can fight? A panda. I'm gonna fight 'em all. A 7-nation army couldn't hold me back. Not using ladders. This is an old one, but have you ever wondered why Leon Kennedy just completely ignores ladders when he wants to descend? He uses them to climb, sure, but regardless of how long that drop is, he just jumps down like he doesn't take fall damage. Which he doesn't. But you can take damage from projectiles and enemies biting you, which surely is less damage to the body than falling down a massive hole? Apparently not. This sort of suggests that if Leon can jump down these massive holes, then his legs must be made of iron, or perhaps he has some sort of Deus Ex style leg augmentation or something. Granted, Resident Evil 4 isn't exactly the most serious game you would find, but this inconsistency does raise some questions along with my eyebrows. Caesar's Legion Strength. And before you ask, Hail Caesar! Or Caesar or whatever. I always ended up siding with the Legion if I'm honest. I don't think the NCR has what it takes to maintain stability in the region, and none of the others do either. The Legion is really the only option, despite the slavery and genocide it brings with it. However, I've also wondered how the Legion has managed to survive this long and conquer what it has with what it has. For you see, the Legion lacks something that most of its enemies have, which would suggest that the Legion is doomed from the beginning, yet this seems to have had no effect on them. During the Battle of Hoover Dam, the first one, the Legion lost the battle but was said to have put up quite a fight, leading to many NCR casualties. That's great and all, until you stop to consider what equipment both sides had. The Legion fights using similar weapons that the ancient Romans had, so short swords, machetes, throwing spears and some guns. The NCR have a lot more guns. In fact, almost every tribe and raider group going carry guns of all shapes and sizes. So how is it then that after running straight at the NCR troops, and their rangers as well, don't forget, that the Legion were able to not only show themselves to be fierce warriors, but were also able to inflict casualties upon their enemies? Surely since the NCR have superior firepower against an enemy with almost zero firepower, surely the Legion would have been decimated. Okay, they may have had the upper hand in close quarters, but these battles never begin in close quarters. So how has the Legion managed to become so feared in the wastes?
Mambo No. 5.
Sastasha has sex slaves. Yeah, that pretty much sums up this entry. The very first dungeon you encounter in Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn has sex slaves held captive in it. And it's not on the main track, so many of you may be blissfully unaware of this fact. Most dungeon runs you will find involves the whole party just trying to get to the end as quickly as possible without dying, but if you manage to get the chance, there's an extra key that unlocks a large cell door, and inside are a group of female hostages. Now, you could argue that they're just going to be sold into slavery or ransomed as is, but if you listen to what they say, you begin to put together what they were going to be used for, or have been used for. This never comes up again in the game, though there are references to rape and pillage in other places. And this is hidden away in the very first dungeon too. So there you have it. Sastasha has sex slaves in it. Is Senua a mass murderer? I know, before you say it, yes I know. Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice has a lot of psychological stuff going on, and a lot, if not all, of what you see are just Senua's hallucinations. However, I'd argue that not all of it is just a hallucination. The voices aren't real, the fire and decay aren't real. I soon figured out that the permadeath wasn't real either, though good on the game for making me panic that my game could wipe soon. I get that the beast wasn't real, and if I'm honest, probably most of the game wasn't real either. However, during combat, Senua is clearly taking physical damage. She gets cut, loses blood, and begins to breathe raggedly. And while this too can just be seen as Senua hallucinating that she's taking damage, and is reacting accordingly to it, despite not actually being hurt, some of her injuries persist even after combat has ended. There are a few cases where Senua will finish a particular section and will proceed to limp about the place once everything has calmed down. If the action we're seeing on screen is actually Senua's current state of mind, then her injuries should disappear too once peace is returned. Yet they don't always do that. And considering that Senua has journeyed to a place that used to be inhabited, what's to say that people haven't returned thereafter? It's well known that in real life, once a village was sacked or raided before being put to the torch, some of the scattered inhabitants would return to rebuild, having nowhere else to go. This wasn't always the case, mind you, but it certainly happened. So all I'm asking here is it possible? Is it remotely possible that when Senua sees shadows and demons approaching her with swords drawn, that what she's actually seeing are the village's residents return to begin the rebuilding process? And naturally, after returning, they've seen a female warrior freaking out in a berserk-like state, and have deemed her a threat. This would mean that Senua is killing more poor and innocent people, all the while seeing them as dangerous entities. And yes, the fact that you can die and respawn further back would suggest that this isn't the case, and that the fights were merely just an illusion. However, there is also the possibility that you could go throughout the entire game without dying even once, so only, except for that one time near the beginning, is really considered canon. Despite all the bad things that have happened to Senua during the course of her life, we may be able to add mass murdering to that list. David Sarif surviving Panchea. I for one was happy to see David Sarif return in Mankind Divided. He seemed like a down-to-earth kind of guy in Human Revolution, and I always liked him. I didn't necessarily agree with his policies and agendas, and certainly not his contracts with the military, but I liked him all the same. But despite this, I was kind of surprised that he showed up in Mankind Divided. Not many people escaped from there after Jensen blew it up and let it sink to the bottom of the ocean. Now, it's only sort of explained how Jensen escaped from there alive, while other characters such as William Taggart, Hugh Darrow, and Zhao Yongru were added to the missing/presumed dead list. Though we all know what happened to Zhao, David Sarif's explanation is never really given. I'd argue that the odds of surviving that event are practically zero. Jensen's survival can almost certainly be attributed to his augmentations, and while Sarif also has augs, he doesn't have any, or as many, quite like Jensen does. All we know about what happened to Sarif is that he ended up in hospital for a while, which would mean that he suffered some injuries and was evacuated out of there in time. Yet when you meet him near the end of Human Revolution, he has barricaded himself deep within the facility for protection against the horde of angry orcs. You know who else did that? Bill Taggart. Yet Taggart is presumed dead. No one has heard from him since. Given the location of where they were both hiding, though not in the same place, it would stand to reason that anyone hiding that far down in the facility would be brown bread should the facility self-destruct. Yet Sarif didn't die. Not only that, but his injuries weren't life-threatening. So, once again, I ask you, how did he survive that? Because it seems to me that he shouldn't have. Nerasteral's house! Do you remember me talking about that one girl in Skingrad who may be engaging in necrophilia? Well, if you don't, then here's where to go. Go to Skingrad's East Gate and walk straight down the road. On the left, you'll eventually come across an alchemist's shop. However, for the purpose of this video, I want you to do something else. Instead of going inside, I want you to turn around and then go to the manor on the right. Inside, you'll discover that this house has been completely trashed and has been overrun with the undead. Yet no explanation is ever given for why this has happened. This manor never gets mentioned in any shape or form, and despite this manor being called Nerasteral's house, no character called Nerasteral exists in this game. So what exactly happened here? Most likely, this was originally going to be a quest, but was later dropped, though not removed entirely. But this is one of those moments where you'd never know about this unless you just happen to stop, take notice, and decide to go inside. Interestingly enough as well, the music for the main part of the manor is registered as dungeon music in-game, rather than the standard dwelling setting.
Another one bites the dust. Another one bites the dust.
Lit torches! Probably the most common noticed yet unexplained element in any game comes from times when the player is sent to explore an abandoned dungeon or lair that's located underground. Most of these will include the undead or perhaps loads of traps and whatnot. Dust and cobwebs are bound, and the feeling that you're rediscovering something that's been long lost to time is right to follow. Except not. Because what I want to know is, if this place has been abandoned for countless of years, perhaps centuries, then who's been lighting all of these torches? Even back in the day, torches had to be relit constantly, and was part of a soldier's duty when on watch. The pitch from the rag would eventually get used up, and as that burnt off, the torch would go out. To put it simply, they needed tending to every so often. Yet these dungeons that have long been abandoned many years ago still have lit torches. This would mean that one of two things are going on. One, that the dungeons aren't unoccupied and whoever is keeping them lit is still around, or two, that these torches use indestructible pitch. Now, the latter doesn't exist, while the former is also not true, as you can find out for yourself if there's anyone alive in these places by exploring them for yourselves. Unless the undead have been doing it, and are actually a lot more intelligent and civilized as we previously thought, the lit torches are a clear contradiction to what we've been told and what we know. And for that reason alone, lit torches takes the #1 spot on this list. And that's all we have time for here, but if you're a lot more intelligent and civilized as we previously thought, then like this video and subscribe as always. Don't forget that I'm on both Twitter, where you can find out which video is out next and when, and Patreon, and you can find the links to both of those in the description below. But until the next shit video, see ya!
Life is killing me. I swear sometimes I